Hello and welcome back to episode number 17 of the Indiegameiacs podcast. You may have noticed it's been a few weeks since the last release, and that is just because I moved house, basically, and I couldn't find all my PC parts, so I couldn't record anything. But now I have them all back together, bar a few cables and cameras, but don't worry about that. I had enough to record a podcast, and what a podcast I have in store for you today. We are joined by none other than Dan Marshall and Ben Ward from the fabulous Size 5 games. So I'm sure you already know, but their game, Lair of the Clockwork God, is an absolute masterpiece, plus the many other games they've released. So I was really, really excited when they agreed to come on the podcast, just so I could pick their brain a little bit. So hopefully you're going to get some great tips and bits of info out of this conversation, because it was fantastic. I loved it. So you didn't come here to listen to me waffle on. I'll do all the waffling at the end. Let's jump into the interview. It's maybe a bit of a strange start because we were chatting for a while beforehand and it got a bit confusing. But anyway, let's jump straight into it. Say hello to Dan and Ben. Let's start with, you can at least introduce yourself and tell us what your main game is. At least start there. Who wants to go first?
I'm Dan Marshall. I run Size 5 Games, and my main game is Lair of the Clockwork God, which is just so happens to be the new one that I'm promoting.
And I'm Ben Ward, and I'm a freelance designer, and I've worked on a few games for Size 5 Games, mainly the Dan and Ben games, and my main game is also Lair of the Clockwork. No, my main game is Devil's Kiss, which is a visual novel that we recently released, but you also get it free if you buy Lair of the Clockwork God.
Oh, smooth. That's good.
Yes.
Right, that's the only boring question. Well, I can't promise that. That's the only default question I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
So I only found. I'm going to say, do you know what? Lair of the Clockwork God. I really struggle with the word lair. Why is that? Does anyone else struggle with that?
Yeah, I always say it like layer, and
yeah, so do I.
It should really rhyme with hair, shouldn't it? It should be lair.
Lair.
But then you sound like Noel Coward or something, like, come into my lair. I don't know. How do you say it, Dan? You probably got some weird Dorset pronunciation of it, have you?
I say Lair.
Lair.
Yeah. I have trouble writing it. I know the number of times I've caught a tweet where I've written Liar of the Clockwork God. My fingers, when I'm on autotype mode, seem to prefer the word liar. Don't know why that is.
Yeah, well, that says more about you than them.
It's a deep psychological problem.
Yeah. I don't know why I struggle with that, so I'm going to call it Clockwork God. Wow.
Just call it God. Just call it God.
God, yeah. I need one-word games, please.
When we came up with the title, I remember we said that it was a bit mouthy, and the official title would be Lair of the Clockwork God, but we would refer to it everywhere colloquially as Clockwork God, which I don't think is as good a title. So, but Clockwork God works fine. That's what I call it sometimes. Okay.
Yeah, that was a longer explanation of the. I can't say that word. I can't say any words. We'll just skip words. It's just.
So we've not done a podcast yet where the first question is how do you pronounce words? You've definitely hit a level there. Maybe that's like maybe you should shift focus of your podcast away from indie games, just to generally different pronunciations of words.
Just words. I call it the word podcast.
Yeah, you could call it Lair of the Words, and then.
So I found your game. I've gone to your game now. Actually, not that long ago, because I was watching Stuart from Get Into Gaming, which I'm sure you're aware of.
Oh yeah.
And he loves your game. He loves Clockwork God, and he kept mentioning it. I thought, I must get round to looking at that, and then eventually, I buckled and I picked the game up. And I thought, well, he keeps mentioning things about Game of the Year contender. I'm like, oh, well, this is a high praise indeed. So I thought I'll check it out.
You hated it,
and yeah, I just got you on here to say screw you.
It's the worst game I've ever played.
Oh no, it's a gotcha. It's like we're on Jerry Springer or something.
Well, it could have been Jeremy Beadle.
Which would be better? I don't know.
So, and it's actually given me a weird problem, this game, because as I was playing it, it's absolutely amazing, and I totally agree with Stuart I think it is already. It's my game of the year already. I can't.
bless
See,
you.
I
Thank you very
can't
much.
see it being beaten. It's unbelievable. And
I don't know. Splunky 2 comes out in about a week, so I should think basically Splunky 2 will shit on any Game of the Year awards we're likely to win. But
well, not if I don't play it.
well, yeah, true. Well, maybe then we should start a Twitter campaign now for everyone to not play Splunky 2 until January, so that we might win some Game of the Year awards.
I think so. I think it's an option. I think it's an option. But the problem, do you know, this is really weird. This is probably the first time it's happened to me. I'm playing it and I'm playing it through. I haven't finished it, so disclaimer, no spoilers, please.
Okay.
I'm about 5 hours in, which I'm pretty sure it shouldn't be taking me that long. But I'm just
No, that's all right. You take as long as you like. That's
enjoying
one of the joys of adventure games.
Absolutely.
You can dally around all you like.
Yeah, we normally say like I think 8 to 10 hours is like a rough estimate. So if you're halfway through at 5 hours, that seems pretty standard.
yeah.
The game deliberately gets like faster and faster towards the end. So like it starts out quite like big levels and sort of slightly slower, more methodical.
Yeah.
Process to solving those levels, and then like as you get on, we pick up the pace and levels get shorter and shorter and shorter, and things start moving along a lot quicker. So like you might think you're about halfway through, but actually you're quite a lot further than that.
Well, the problem,
Where are you? Where have you got to?
I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but I have just done. Christ.
Have you done Feeling Old?
No, I've just done all the. I've met the dinosaurs.
Oh, you enjoy? Okay.
And I think I've
only. You are doing quite slow. Yeah, you're really slow. That's really embarrassing. Be embarrassed to be only there at 5 hours. I can get to that point within about 25 minutes, so that's quite embarrassing.
Wow, thanks.
But
the problem I have is so now my problem is I actually don't want to finish it.
Oh no, you can't do that. I do that with games where you go, "Oh, I'm enjoying this so much, I don't want to finish it." I did that with Breath of the Wild, where I was like, I don't want to go and do the end of game baddie because I'm enjoying playing this game so much, and eventually you just peter out rather than.
I know, but I'm finishing. I'm going, but it's actually got to. But that's the level that the game is at. It's so good. I'm almost want to wait.
There's been a couple of people who have like really taken the time to drink it in, which is really nice. Like, because I think quite a lot of people just play games like this and they just sort of they move from one challenge to the next as quickly as possible and relish the challenges, and that's fine. That's ace if that's what you want to do. But there are a lot of people who enjoy the game a lot more by finding every line of dialogue and finding every option to talk to about, and because quite a lot of people don't bother looking at some of the background objects and don't bother engaging with all the dialogue choices and all that sort of stuff, which is fine. But like some people drink it in and love it, and getting their main sense of joy is from finding those little hidden jokes and funny bits of dialogue and stuff like that, and other people find their joy in just blitzing through it as quickly as they can and solving puzzles and seeing what's next. So
I always try and go through all the dialogue because it's so funny. The writing is fantastic, and you can hear it even just talking to you both for I don't know how long it's been, 20 minutes. You can just hear the game. You can hear the game in you two, which is it's amazing, and that's what's so enjoyable.
That makes sense from a certain point of view, but is also wildly offensive from another.
That's right. You've been offended enough. You're used to it now. It's okay. You're
like a pair of yammering cartoon idiots.
Well, there's the podcast title. Thank you.
Wow, that's quite a good podcast title. Right there.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah. But that's what I love about it, and that's what I really enjoy, because some games you can tell they're created to serve a role, to serve a purpose, and of course you all want to make money, but you can feel when games are made to make money and fit a role. But your game, it doesn't feel like that. It just feels like two friends have created an awesome game, and that's what you're playing. It's amazing.
I think that was one of the joys of indie development, like from way back when I first started, was that when these games came out and they were like 1- and 2-man teams, and you genuinely got a feel for, you felt like you were in the room with the developer when you're playing it, right? If you play Limbo or you play Super Meat Boy, or anything like from that kind of early era, and you think I sort of feel like you're getting an insight into the developer's brain by just playing this thing. That was always one of my favorite things about indie games. And like as teams have got bigger and projects got bigger, obviously you're going to lose a little bit of that. So yeah, it's quite nice that we're still doing that that quite personal touch.
Yeah, it is. It's lovely. But that's enough. That's enough gushing about you guys, because you get that enough, because you've been really successful. I mean, has it been as successful as you'd hoped?
No, not really. It's done. It's critically, it's done really well. Financially, it's sort of struggled. It's done enough to make another game, but like, it's one of those things that, given how positive the feedback has been, how positive the critic reviews and how positive the user reviews are, I would have thought I would be a lot richer. If you'd ever said to me like, oh, if you made a game that got like solid 8 out of 10s, 9 out of 10s, 10 out of 10s, and game of the year nods and all that sort of stuff, I just would have assumed that would sell a lot better than the sort of relatively mediocre amount of money it brings in. But I can't complain, because it is obviously a very loved game, and it's a game that people are really enjoying. So from an airy fairy sort of indie developer artist sort of point of view, yeah, that's fab. I love the reception is a huge success as far as I'm concerned. It would have been nice for it just to make a massive lump sum of money, so I know what I'm doing with the next game. But that's indie development. We'll just, like you say, just do a Kickstarter, or something, and then I'll worry about it further down the line.
But is that going to affect what you do with doing it, even subconsciously or not? Is that going to affect what you do with your next game? Well, would you aim at something? Okay, that was great, but we need to do something that actually brings in some money. So, would that affect?
Yeah, it has affected not only the design of the next game. I learned a lot from Clockwork God that I've said this before, but it's you can't put funny dialogue and satisfying puzzles into a GIF and get it shared. It doesn't work. So like obviously the next game I've looked at what will work in GIFs, what will get shared, what will get talked about, Clockwork God is a lovely, unique game, but it's not like visually, it's like satirical pixel art. It looks like an indie game, right? It's one of those things. So like for everything and also the amount of money it's brought in has impacted as well, because I can't just say hire an artist. I can't just say hello. I'd love to hire Tom, who did art for Clockwork God. I'd love to just say to him, right, 2 years, all day, every day, you're making art for my next game, please, and I'll give you some money. But I can't afford to do that. It's not even an option, because I don't know that I'm necessarily going to have enough money to fund that. So yeah, everything impacts the next thing. I'd love to say that I'm just making games for the fun of it, but there is a practicality that I've got to keep a roof over my head and I've got to eat. So I think the next game is being designed deliberately with a sort of slightly more shareable social aspect to it.
Oh, so it's really interesting. I mean, it's really interesting because when you start developing games, I suppose there's not really anything you don't ever. When does that come up in the conversation? That doesn't. You're just creating the games that you want to create.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a shame that a game as so good as yours is not, doesn't mean that you can just commit your time and energy to whatever you want next. But that is the practicalities, and that's what as developers that are listening have to bear that in mind. And it is important when you are designing your game that you do think about and that's about the marketing and the sharing and the building the community before the game even exists, because it is it's important.
But it's not only that the next game, my next game, is probably going to be 2022, 2023 by the time it's done and out. And look at Game Pass and Game Pass's popularity now. I can easily see by the time my next game comes out that a single player 8-hour narrative thing, I can easily see video games slipping into like a Netflix or a Spotify style subscription service within the next 5 years. And with that, you can't be making something like Lair of Clockwork God, I don't think, that is, here's the beginning, here's the end, and then that's your lot. because in order to make money out of those sort of services, your game is going to have to be something that people are addicted to and keep coming back and playing for like 400 hours or whatever. And obviously, an 8 to 10 hour narrative experience is going to bring you. If everyone's subscribed to this Netflix style service, and like a load of people play it for 8 hours, it's going to bring in very little money, I assume. Looking at how much artists get from Spotify per play of their song, it's not going to bring in the cash necessary. So like, even that, like looking forward, what are you going to make next is trying to read the room, trying to read where things are going, and plan accordingly. And I will be completely wrong about it, because that happened with Clockwork God. Clockwork God, we started developing this version of it when Night in the Woods was doing extremely well, selling incredibly well, and Thimbleweed Park came out. So there was obviously like a big appetite for single player narrative, funny puzzle games. And here we are, like 3 years later, and like, not necessarily hugely popular. So like, in 5 years' time, I'd probably be completely wrong about that, and everyone will be like, "Oh God, another game that you can play and play and play for 4 hours. So we play and play for 400 hours. I just wish there were more games that were 8 hour,
well,
8 hour single player narratives."
It might come back. You might turn into like vinyl. Oh, great! Look at these classics, regular style playing. Yeah. Well, just for Clockwork God, a couple of things that I just wanted to go over was, how did you deal with the accessibility options? Because I think they're the best I've seen in any game, if I'm honest. The level of detail you go in with the with the text options, and you've got even the helping with the story and the platforms. There's so much to help people who have got any accessibility options.
It was all relatively simple, to be honest with you. It started out because I knew I needed to make it so you could make the text bigger. That was basically the start of it. I was like, some people are not going to be able to read this font; it's tiny. Some people are going to be playing it on a screen far away. I'll make this, and while I was there, I thought I'll make it so I'm aware the font is a little bit like hard to read, so I put the open dyslexic font in, and I put it up on Twitter saying I can't remember. I did like a couple of other things, slowing the text speed down and things like that. And I put it up on Twitter, and then just got like a flood of people saying it's really handy with my condition for XYZ, for to have black boxes behind all the text, for example. Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, that's a 20-minute job, like adding an option to a menu and then saving out whether that option is on or off, and then displaying a box behind based on that on-off flag was exceptionally simple work. And there was one, like the whole thing, all those accessibility options, I think took like 4 or 5 hours or so, which is like basically an afternoon's work. And there was one of them that kept on breaking. Oh, it was someone said it would be nice to have to display which character is talking above every line of dialogue. And I think it was that one. There was one of them that basically took another 6 hours to fix. It kept on like, there was a bug with it that kept on breaking or something like that. And so like so the whole thing was like a day's work, but only because one of them was really, really stubborn and needed fixing. But like, it was, it's a joy to do it. I keep on saying, like, I'm embarrassed that none of my other games have this stuff in, because it's the simplest thing to do. It means that the game can be played by so many more people.
Yeah.
And it was, in terms of complicated programming, it's exceptionally simple. It's like, the sort of thing you can do on a sort of lazy Friday afternoon when your brain is worn out from, doing some really, really complicated stuff, and you're like, it's only noon, but my brain is fried. You can just do something like this. It's just putting in options in putting in menu options in an options menu is nothing.
But you say that, but how many actually do it? Because I've not seen, honestly, that many games.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is I like reading reviews. It comes up. It gets mentioned a lot more than I expected, and I hadn't really considered until now, like how rare it is to see this like kind of stuff, especially to this degree. But like, so many reviews have mentioned it and said it's great that they've got all this stuff in there. But I hadn't realised really how few
it's only when you
games
start
have this
looking,
kind
you
of
think,
stuff in
no,
there.
I can't change anything because I have some slight vision problems myself, so I do always check this stuff just for myself. So it's fantastic, but again, it
I
seems
mean,
like, it seems obvious.
you get to, it's one of those things that's only going to go in. Well, all right, 99% of the time is only, and none of this is going to go in at the start of development. It's always going to go in like towards the end of development, and it is really difficult to explain like at that end run of making a game how much everything hangs together like a really fucking wobbly house of cards. Like, you know, it's you can for example optimize something that's and get yourself like 2 frames a second back, but then you play the game and 3/4 of the way through you realize that something is completely broken as a result of it, right? So like you can put in like black boxes behind text and you go, yep, that'll be fine, and then not yeah, I didn't realize that we can't do that because of this one specific case where these 2 characters are talking uses a slightly different system of dialogue, you know, blah 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 blah. So it is like a kind of a gamble. It's to add quite a lot of that stuff, you know. It's making video games, making indie video games, it's all about money, of which there is none, or of which there is very little. You know, every game has a budget, and I can see that like adding quite a lot of this stuff, which for me was for Clockwork God just happened to be relatively easy work, but I can see for other games could be a complete fucking nightmare. You know, if you imagine you've got like a, I don't know, say you've got an RPG, like a Deus Ex RPG style inventory system, then suddenly coming to that and saying, okay, now can we make it so that all these boxes are readable with this, you know, we can change the size of the font in all these with this slider. That suddenly is 2 months work, or a month's work, and you just go, well, we haven't got the cash for that. We can't afford to do that. So like, I can see it. I will make the next game with this sort of stuff in mind, you know, but it's still going to go in towards the end. But I will probably be more mindful of it now. But yeah, it's a really weird one to call. But like, if you can do it, because it's, yeah, as I say, you're helping people play your game, which is obviously brilliant. But also more people are going to buy your game because they know they can play it, which is obviously also brilliant. So it's kind of a win-win for everyone, really. I'm just, as I say, I'm ashamed that I haven't done it in games previously. You know, there is an infinite number of things I could add to that accessibility menu, right? There's no limit to that, and at some point you've got to say, all right, I think that's enough. I can't just keep on adding accessibility options forever. You know, you've got to draw a line somewhere. That's, you know, the nature of literally every project. And I'm sorry, that there comes a point where you have to draw that line, because, you know, I could just keep on doing it forever.
But well, it's important, and like I said, it's interesting the fact that you're thinking about your next game already and implementing these options already. So I think it's for developers. I think it's something that's overlooked quite a lot. As Ben was saying, you know, he was surprised how little it actually appears, because it's just not I don't know, it just doesn't seem to be the forefront of people's minds, and you know.
But I mean, you know, like my next game, I'm sort of aware that you know, it would be good to make sure your games are playable by people, I don't know, who can only use one hand, or who can only use like, who can't, you know, who are going to use like special effect style controllers, you know, things like that. And I'm making games thinking, oh, this is, you know, I hold down this button to jump, without really thinking about like, can everyone hold down that button to jump? Is this immediately making this hard for people? So like, having that in the back of your mind it's not something I'm an expert in. It's not something I know anything about. But like, having that in the back of your mind and looking at ways that, like, okay, how can we add in something to make this more usable by more people? It seems like relatively sensible stuff to me. Just to be thinking about it during development, rather than like at the end and then suddenly going, oh, hang on, this game is impossible for like a large number of people, and there's nothing we can do about it.
I'm sure that's going to be really useful to a lot of developers, because I don't think it's covered an awful lot. So okay, well, let's carry on. Let's go on to What did I make? I even made some notes. Check me out. I never make notes. So you guys are special. When you were making this, did you? Because I can't even begin to think how you combined the text and the conversations, linked them with the puzzles, and you've got two main mechanics to go out. I mean, was it a massive headache all day to combine all these? Because I don't know how you've done it.
Ben, you're in charge. you remember what it was like.
I think. Yeah, I mean, I think definitely one thing we struggled with was keeping the platforming intertwined with the adventuring, because we've already made 2 adventure games. We're pretty, we're pretty comfortable designing adventure game puzzles and making sure that they work with the story well, and kind of making sure that they make sense to the player and the player's got the information, blah blah blah. But one thing that was quite hard was to keep coming up with interesting ways that the platforming could interact with it, because it's fine for the Dan character to go off and do a bit of platforming on his own, and as a bit of as like a change of pace and all that, but to actually come up with interesting ways that it can interact with the adventure gaming was quite difficult. We had we've got some we had like a handful of clever set piece concepts where I guess I can spoil this one because it's in the very first level, but like just something like Dan will jump on an enemy to kill it and squash it, and then Ben can actually go and pick up that dead enemy and use it as an inventory item. That was like setting out our stall of what we wanted to do, but it's pretty difficult to keep on coming up with that stuff and not just have it be like, well, what if Ben needs to use a box-shaped item and Dan pushes the box-shaped item towards him a bit? Like, to think of stuff that was more interesting than that consistently was quite tricky.
Because you don't want it to feel like you're forcing the gameplay together, do you? But then you also don't want it to feel like 2 separate games.
Yeah. And I mean, that just, that puzzle's just not interesting. It's like, okay, so we've given the player something to do, but they didn't have to think about it. It's basically just saying, can you put, it's busy work, basically. Like, that was the thing to avoid.
The weird thing was as well that, like, there are a number of times in development where you're just like, this is all really good stuff, but this just makes more sense if this is just one character who can do everything. Right? You just go like, we've got 2 characters who can do different things, and all you're doing is pressing a button to flip between them. So making it feel like there was a reason why it's 2 characters and not 1 character, and adding in those moments where you needed 2 people at the same time. I think that was the stuff we struggled with, and we wound up layering quite a lot of that in later because we designed it all and we got it all in place, and the entire game was playable from start to finish before we did any dialogue or graphics or any of that stuff, and make sure that the puzzles and the pacing worked. And like quite a lot of, we got to the game being quite a large amount of the game was basically done and in, and it was all coming together. And then we just go, like this, we need something else here. We need something else here. We need something else here. When the second level where Dan and Ben get back to London originally was just supposed to be like a pure platforming, Dan picks up Ben and runs, and then that's it. And we looked at that and went, well, there's an opportunity here for more of the 2 of them working together. There's an opportunity here for more like upgrade, and so we layered in this puzzle about Dan learning how to pick Ben up and piggyback him, which becomes we turn that into a puzzle rather than just, okay, now Dan can carry Ben, and you've now got that ability. How do we turn that into a puzzle? How do we make that satisfying? How do we make that interesting? And that's why, because that entire level was set up and ready and done, which is why at the start of that level you have to walk left to get to all the puzzle stuff, because everything was all set up and working from the right hand side onwards. And I was just like, it just makes it a lot easier for me to just hide all this over to the left. Which is why that's like that.
I was just going to say that's how a lot of the development, a lot of it. I mean, even back to the pure adventure games, that is how we do it a lot of the times. We meet up, we'd have a design meeting. We'd come up with the puzzles that we liked, and we'd design the level, and it'd be great. And then Dan would code it, and get it working at a basic level. And then he would say, right, now I've got it in the game, I can see that it needs a bit more platforming, or it needs a puzzle here, or it needs to be harder, or it needs to be more complex. We need to add some layers into it. And so that's kind of how we would do that. We would see how it played, and then go and have another design meeting of like, right, how can we make, like Dan said, how can we make getting this ability more interesting? Basically, it would just be like, is this interesting enough? Not yet. Let's keep on. Let's think of some interesting. We'd just sit there in the pub and be like, right, we've got to come up with something clever. Something that we haven't done yet.
Let's think of something clever.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I think it was that level, the London level. That is the moment I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. That was the turning point for me. I was really enjoying it up until there, and I know that's still really early in the game, but it was then I realised, oh my God, the work you've done here is just unbelievable.
It's really weird because I see that level as like 10% of how it was in my imagination when we designed it.
Really?
And I keep on putting like stuff in. So you're running through London and all the apocalypses are happening behind you. And my vision of it is very much not what was on the screen, what wound up in being in the final game. And to this day, I look at it and go, oh man, it's a damp squib of a level. Like, I like it and I think it's good. And I've obviously played it 100,000 times. So like I can only imagine what it's like to play that through for the first time and having it all going off behind you. Whereas obviously I played it through for the first time with nothing happening behind you. Yeah. And then I played it through with like one or two things happening behind you. And then that was like that for the next 100 times I played it. And then I slowly added more and more things. And then like quite a lot of stuff went in the final month before release, I think. Because I basically just went, this still isn't hitting that point. And it's quite weird because I've seen a lot of people play it and just go, man, that was just... Because I sat down and watched a lot of people play it and they were like, man, this is intense. And I just think, is it? Because I
yeah, really?
Yeah.
No, that was amazing to me, and the art style is beautiful, and the background is it looks fantastic, and you can't beat a good chase scene, can you? I love. I think it was the end of Halo 1 or 2. Which one? Where you're escaping from the ship. I can't remember which one that is. On the Warthog. And
I've never played any Halo games.
Oh.
I played a bit of Halo 3, and I was a big like PC FPS fan, and I played a bit of Halo 3, and it was subpar to the stuff that I'd been playing on PC. So I dropped it like a hot rock.
Well, I agree, because I've always been a PC player as well, and I cannot shoot anything with a controller. It's impossible.
Yeah, I think that was part of my problem as well.
Impossible. But I got to the end, and the last scene is where you are escaping on a warthog out of a ship, and I don't know why it reminded, a stupid comparison, but it reminded me of that feeling of destruction going on. You're running, and with what had gone on previously at the start of the level, which I won't spoil, it's just so much. That's why I loved it. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So
yeah, I think that's like a bit of a trope in a good way. Tropes aren't necessarily a bad thing. But it's a bit of a gaming trope now. Is the level where everything's going to shit and you're running through and narrowly escaping a load of scripted, destruction. So I like that we managed to get one of those in our game. It's kind of like a reference, like a specific reference to a game like Cannabalt. Is that how you pronounce it? Cannabalt. Like the endless runner through a cityscape thing, but then it is more of a broader reference as well. And I think those are references that I particularly like in this game, is where it's just like, it's this bit that now that games have been going on for a few decades, where they've been able to have like narrative stuff going on, and like as a player, you're starting to notice patterns for the first time. You're starting to notice tropes and stuff, and so it's I enjoy that we managed to kind of pick a few of those out and
we should have done a
do
level
our own
where
twist.
you're should have done a level where you're on the back of a lorry with a mounted gun, and the lorry's going really quickly through some jungle and smashing through things, and there's men on motorbikes coming up, and you have to shoot the men on the motorbikes, and they explode and with one hit. We should have done one of those. That would have been quite funny.
You should have been escaping through a council estate or something.
Yeah, and then you get all your, Ben should have all his inventory taken away from him halfway through the game and then given back to him. Like he finds, like, he has it all taken away from him and it's all destroyed. But then, like, he escapes a single room and he finds a near identical collection of all the stuff that he needs to have.
Again, it's like a slightly different color.
Yeah.
Oh, we should have done that.
This is good stuff.
That's a great joke. Write that down. We'll do it in the sequel. Oh, we'll make the sequel.
Quick, take notes. Right, so I've got a couple of listener questions that I just want to go over. So I had, number one was from a mystery caller.
Ooh.
Oh my God.
Why is Ben such an idiot loser?
That was for me, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, yeah.
I don't know, Ben. You're probably best placed to answer that one.
Well, the character Ben is an idiot loser because that's funnier than than him being a brain box winner, and also it would feel a little weird. Like, I think we try and stay away from showing them being too good at anything for too long, because then it just feels like the traditional non-misogynist definition of Mary Sue, where it's just like a self-insert character who is like amazing at everything. What's the most recent example I saw of this was the girl with the dragon tattoo, where they said, oh yeah, and there's this character in it who's a writer who is just cool and shagging all the women and punching all the baddies, and it's clearly just a really painfully obvious self-insert. So we we try and stay away from that, but we don't want to make them too awesome. They're idiots a lot of the time.
That's the video game. That's the video game, Ben.
Yeah.
Why he's an idiot? What's your excuse?
Bad genetics,
Ben,
I guess.
Ben is actually wildly more intelligent than me, so
actually,
you're not an idiot.
It's wildly most intelligent, Dan.
Okay, well there you go then. Yeah. Shakespeare.
I'm not going to agree or disagree here. I'm not getting involved. Nicely done, Ben. That was very smooth. I like it.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have another question from Patrick Rose, aka Drug Crazed, on Twitter.
Yep.
Look at that. And he asked, "What's the joke that got away? Either it turned out to be not as funny as the amount of work to make it funny would have been." Oh my God, this is. I might need to.
Let's just stick with that first. Yeah, it's all right, Patrick. We understand the question. I'm wildly intelligent. You don't need to explain your question to me. For God's sake. All right. One joke that, it didn't get away exactly as it was discarded, but one joke that I wanted to play with the gender of the Clockwork God and how Dan and Ben. How they approach it and what they're because the general setup is that the character Dan is a trendy indie platformer. He wants to be very considerate and woke and all this kind of thing, and there's some hints also that he might be a little performative about it, but he's generally trying to be very 21st century and modern, and Ben is basically a dickhead, and he's stuck in the 90s at best, and very very unprogressive and everything. So so those are their two kind of general character directions, which fit in with the new platformer and the old adventure gaming and everything. So I thought it would be very I thought it'd be interesting and funny to see how they what pronouns they choose to use for the Clockwork God. So like Dan would always refer to Clockwork God as they, and Ben would always refer to it as it, because partly because he's not thinking about pronouns in a modern way, but also partly because he doesn't like this new Portal Thomas was alone gaming habit of anthropomorphizing squares basically, or cubes, and like having huge emotional attachments to inanimate objects. He doesn't like, that's a bit too wishy-washy and lovey-dovey for him, so it kind of works on a few levels. And so I was talking about this to Dan, and he made he made an amazing joke that the Clockwork God, they would ask the Clockwork God, and the Clockwork God would say, being a machine, would say, "I'm non-binary." So it would be a computer coding joke, which I thought was hilarious. And Dan was like, "No, you can't. No, don't actually put that in the game. That's awful." I was like, "No, it's brilliant," and I kept I kept it on our big list of jokes that had to go in. And I was like, "This is clever and interesting and funny, and it's got like a really bad pun at the end. It's brilliant." And Dan kept on saying, like, "I really don't think," and I was like, I was writing bits of dialogue, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to write it and put it in, and it's going to prove to Dan how brilliant it is. And I just couldn't get it to work. I wrote it and rewrote it, and I was like, actually, this is not working at all. So I had to take it out after all my insistence that it was going to be brilliant. I was like, no.
It's one of those things where it's just the propensity for it to be misread and misunderstood, as far as I was concerned, was just too high. They're like,
yeah,
the possibility that arseholes would leap on it as a derogatory thing to say was just too high, and it just didn't say, that sort of stuff just didn't sit well with me. But
yeah, I mean, my thought was,
if you're making jokes like that, it has to be cast iron. What your intention is behind it, and I don't know, it just didn't.
If you have to explain it and it's okay, then it's probably not, isn't it? It's easier to just avoid it.
My thought was that if we make it clear what our intent is, then that's fine. Yeah. It'll work, and the people who are actually paying attention will understand what we're doing. But it was just far too difficult to get that intent across, clearly, and not in a very, very clunky way. So it was too clunky. There was too much. It was too sweaty, as the blank check podcast would say. Just you could feel the work. You could feel all the work that I was doing to try and get it going. So yeah, so Dan was totally right, and that it's a shame because I really like the idea behind it, but that went.
Right, there was one puzzle that I really liked, and I think Ben really liked. That it was a big joke, but basically I don't want to spoil it too much. But there's a bit in the game where Ben is suddenly without Dan, and the puzzle is life would be very easy if the other person was around, but they're not. So life is very, very difficult. And we had this puzzle where you had to get through a door that would be very easy if Dan was there, and it's sad that he's not there. So we had this puzzle that was really convoluted and boring about the reality of life without another person, where
purposefully convoluted and boring.
Purposefully convoluted, and it was like it was all about power cells and batteries in power, like restoring power to things, and you didn't have enough batteries to restore power to all the things, so you had to keep on taking the batteries out of things to power another thing. And like just getting through this one door, which if Dan was there would have been over in an instant, took like quarter of an hour because you were constantly shifting batteries around the place. And it was very clever, and it did what we wanted to do, but at the end of the day it was very boring. It was like it was extremely boring to do, even if you understood that it was boring for a clever reason. It was boring. And I remember we got to that, and I just said to Ben, we need to think of something better for this. And you were quite dismissive of that. You were like, no, this is great, this is great, this is great. And we went to the pub and we came up with a funny, well, what would we do if we were doing this funny? And within about an hour, we had something that was making us cry laughing funny. And we were like, okay, we've got to do this instead. This is much better.
Yeah, and initially, the idea, our thinking was that would be like a hidden funny way. Like that if players just happen to think to do this one thing, they might find the alternate funny way to do it. And then we were like, the funny way is so much better, though, isn't it? let's get rid of the boring one. Yeah. But I like how, like, for me, I think that's actually really the way it worked out is great because in the level it is all very serious, and it is like, you know, what if Dan weren't here, kind of, we're playing this straight, it's emotional, and then it kind of descends into this big silly funny thing, and I think that works really well because, you know, because the whole game is talking about how indie games deal with sensitive subjects, and, you know, we're not like taking the piss and mocking them for tackling this stuff, because it's really cool that video games are tackling this stuff, but it's just kind of poking fun at some of the hurdles that we all hit along the way. So I think it worked out really nicely that we tried to do something really interesting and deep and serious, and we did exactly the same thing as all these other games have done, which is like we kind of had to give in to the player experience and say, well, we've got to make it fun though. Like, we can't just make like a really boring, like depressing, you know, shit experience for the player, because that's just not going to work. So I quite like that we said, can we do it any better? No, we can't. We've also got to, you know, kind of compromise the, you know, we're not going to make the Schindler's List of video games either.
The that whole section as well speaks to Ben's character a lot better as well. That, like, it is this very morose, serious, played straight level, and then, but at the end, Ben's attitude is honest to his character throughout the rest of it, which I like. That, you know, he's irreverent. This is nonsense. This, you know, this isn't really happening. He's got a certain practicality to it, which works a lot better than if we were trying to force the issue with him.
Yeah, a lot of the time, Ben is kind of a stand-in for like petulant or entitled gamers, and the Clockwork God who is making these levels for them is like is the high-minded game designer who's always very disappointed when the reality of putting a player into his wonderful touching game kind of, you know, starts, like the player, like putting a player in there kind of starts to poke holes in it. You know, it's like when you're watching a Half-Life 2 interactive cutscene and the player's just jumping on desks and, you know, kind of like teabagging the cat. Like, one of the characters is doing a really well acted monologue that took, you know, like weeks and weeks of mocap and animation and voice animation. And the character's just kind of like staring at their crotch or whatever. You know, it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, the face palming, like, oh god, why do I bother?
Yeah.
Okay, well, Patrick, if that didn't answer your question, I don't know what will. So awesome.
I mean, maybe we didn't understand the question. So, like, no, if he'd explained it a bit more thoroughly, maybe he would have got a better answer.
Right, question number 3. It's from Instagram this time. This is from Over and Out, and he said, "Oh, a little plug here straight away. I like it. I do some soundtracks for indie games. Nice. There we go. Hit him up. And I'm always curious as to how you pick the music for your game. So, what did you do?"
I work with a composer called Tobey Evans, and I've worked with him since The Swindle. And he's now my default go-to for every game. I will not assume, but I will go pleading with him to make sure he's available to work on it. I work on it because he really knocked it out of the park with the Swindle soundtrack, which was an impossible job, because I basically said to him, it's a crime caper, but I don't want like a 1960s, like the obvious 1960s
Ocean's 11 type.
Just the very idea of it bored me. So I said to him, I want a cyberpunk soundtrack, but as if it was written in the Victorian age. And I remember sending him that brief and then apologizing in the same email that that's such a sort of arsehole descriptor to work with, that it was just, that's not. He's like, what sort of music do you want? I want Victoriana cyberpunk. And I just thought, that's such a,
what's the novel?
I don't even know what that would sound like. And the stuff he sent back was just amazing. And genuinely, like, the soundtracks of Swindle, there is nothing like it. It's amazing work. And then
he's got that, and the one for Kickmen on Bandcamp.
Yeah,
and I fully recommend buying those, because they are absolutely incredible. His versatility is amazing. There are just so many different musical styles, within the one game. Like, especially for the Swindle, where like Dan said, there's like the Victorian harpsichord mixing with dubstep, and then there's like some heavy metal comes in, and then there's like classical music that, honestly, if you told me that he'd just taken a Beethoven CD or whatever and put it in there, I would have believed you. It's really, really impressive, and I'll put those in on my MP3 player, like in regular rotation, and go jogging to them and stuff, because they're brilliant.
So, but Clockwork God was a lot harder, because I was really adamant that I wanted originally it was like, I was like, it needs to be piano and cello and like sweeping, like indie music, like that. It needs to be a pastiche of every indie game soundtrack, of that sort of plinky plonky piano and long drawn out cello stuff. And I was adamant that that's what we needed. And then he'd made all this beautiful music, and I put it in the game, and it just did not work with like this very morose, meaningful music with Dan and Ben making these stupid jokes. The two didn't gel. They rubbed up against each other so wrong. And I was like, oh God, I'm really sorry. We need to think of something else, because this doesn't work. So we sort of pushed towards something slightly more chiptuney, but like some, slightly more upbeat chiptune. We didn't call it chiptune. We had this. We just called it tech, and I was like, I don't know what this is that you're doing, because it's not chiptune, but we'll call it tech. And really pushed that element of it, and he kept on sending me stuff, and I was like, needs more tech. And eventually we got it, and the way soundtracks work with me and Tobey is the same. It's worked on every single game we've done. Is that the first track takes 3 or 4 months to get right, back and forth, and then the second track takes a day, and the third track takes a day, and the fourth track takes a day. And
once you've got
it and it's in and it's working and you're sure of it, Tobey can just he's like, he can hit the ground running. But but it's all about that first track and going back and forth and making sure that he's happy, I'm happy, that it's going to gel with everything else. We called it completely wrong. Well, I called it completely wrong the first time, but we got there in the end, because the soundtrack is amazing. The Clockwork God soundtrack as well is also some of Tobey's best work, in that it's very different from the Swindle, but like there's some music that he wrote, and I'm just like, this. I remember sending him an email saying, this is the best thing you've ever written. And it's nothing like video game music. It was just really sweeping and heartfelt, and it was very very touching. And I was like, this is, he's such an incredible talent. So there you go. It's soundtracks are a weird part of it, and music is something I understand nothing about, and so it's why it's so good to have Tobey, who he knows all of the notes and all of the different ways of putting notes together to make it sound nice, and it's something I could never even consider doing.
And it's nice to hear. It's nice to have someone ask about it, because like it's something that often it'll get mentioned in the review as the music is great, but that's it. They won't kind of delve into it. But I linked to a YouTube review of it recently in our Discord, and they kind of talked a bit more about it, and they said, it was surprisingly, like Dan said, it does like the Sega Mega Drive chiptune stuff, but it also like is surprisingly emotional, and kind of feels a bit mature. And it was so it's really nice to hear that acknowledged, because it is he does amazing work. One thing that it's a shame. I wish I'm really hoping at some point that people will start to talk about it. But the fact that we have an original song over the credits as well, which is brilliant. Which I think is really it's just really cool in general to have an original song, but also it just came out so well. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's like it feels very Monty Python to me. It's very kind of Life of Brian ending. It's really nice.
Yeah, I look forward to that. Awesome. Well, yeah, but again, the music can, it can totally change your experience of a game or a film or anything. So it's definitely something that people should not be overlooking, but they do, as you know yourselves.
Yeah, it's a critical bit. It's one of those things that once the music goes in, it's like the gel that locks everything, all these disparate parts together. Having music in is I don't want to say it's an easy step because it's not an easy step, but it's one of those jobs that once it's done increases the quality of the game like 10,000-fold. Just immediately the whole thing feels polished and proper, and
it adds a lot of production value.
Yeah.
Like it's like with Back to the Future. Zemeckis said to Alan Silvestri, he said, "This is quite a small budget picture. I want it to feel massive. So can you please give it like a huge John Williams score?" And so he did, and that movie feels incredibly dramatic and epic, even though it's actually quite small scope. But so I guess it's that kind of thing where you've got two pixel characters moving across the screen, but then Tobey puts like a nice big dramatic sting in there, and suddenly it feels awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. So Tobey is the man.
Always. Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Well, I'll make sure I find his details, and we'll leave a link to him. He's obviously doing excellent work. Okay, so the last question I have I'm trying not to keep you guys too long. I'm sorry, but we have from Deanna, who appeared on episode 6 of the podcast. And she just wanted to know about, again, I know this sounds like I'm phrasing it as a little quick question.
Is Deanna doing the wolf game?
Yeah,
the wolf and the wisp.
No, Path of, I always get it wrong. Path of Kami by Stephen Kami.
Yeah, I listened to that episode. That game sounds really interesting.
Yeah, well, she wanted to know what you did about funding for the game and how you approached that side of it.
I'm very lucky in that all my stuff is self-funded. So way back before I was a full-time indie developer, we were making Time Gentlemen Please, and that went on sale just as I secured a contract to make privates with Channel 4. So that went on sale on Steam back when Steam was like a closed door to indie developers. So that was bringing in money while I was working on privates. So I had like a nest egg to prop me up for the next game, which wound up being The Swindle like many years later. But so I burned through that money making The Swindle, which then brought in enough money to make Lair of the Clockwork God and Kickmen. So funding wise is very boring. It's just I spend the money that I've got, or that I'm bringing in, and obviously now that I've got the Swindle and Kickmen and Time Gentlemen Please and Lair of the Clockwork Gods, there's like 4 games. Is that 4? That's 4 up on Steam, and like some of them are on consoles still, like regularly bringing in money, and GOG and stuff still bringing in money. So it's now the point where those games are bringing in like dribs and drabs, but they're bringing in dribs and drabs that's sort of just about theoretically makes up my monthly salary, or near as damn it makes up my monthly salary, and then Steam sales bring in like a big lump sum to propel me over for a little bit longer to make up the shortfall. So it's boring. I don't know I don't know. Yeah. I don't understand about venture capitalists, and I don't understand about Kickstarter or anything like that. Something I might look into for the next thing, but
your regular advice, Dan, has been firstly, when you're first starting out, you know, try and do it in your spare time while you've got like a regular job, right? So you know, you've got financial stability while you're learning how to make games and while you're making your first couple of silly little games that will be shit. And then you also say budget, you know, plan as if your current game is not going to make any money. Like, just assume that it's going to make £0, and what's your plan if that happens? You know, don't assume that you're going to make £1 million on this one, and budget, you know, budget with that in mind. I don't know whether the current landscape is kind of changing that a bit, whether you can assume that, and if that, you know, if you do make £0, you can just do early access or Kickstarter instead. But
I think, you know, it's one of those things where, like, you can just do Kickstarter or early access is, you know, equally, it's quite an easy thing to say, but like, I don't know if any of those are bringing in any money either. It's a very weird time to be releasing indie games. It's harder, you know. I'm like, you know, Size 5 is an established company that, you know, won a BAFTA, has consistently put out 8 out of 10 games for the last decade, 8 out of 10 games, and still, you know, Lair the Clockwork God came out to precisely, I'm not going to say zero, but like near as damn it zero press paying any attention or giving a shit, and still had to like do all that legwork and push to get people to cover it, and beg and call in every favor and all the rest of it. So like, you know, just the fact that you're an established company isn't even enough to get you that level of recognition for your game. So like, yeah, I don't even know if you're releasing something into early access or on Kickstarter. I honestly, if it's your first game or if it's, you know, first or second game, even with a good reputation of, oh, this is the Swindle developer's next game, or, oh, this is, you know, the Kickman developer's next game, even that isn't enough anymore. You've got to basically, if you want the press to cover your game has to already be a success, I think.
I think you get more of the we got a lot more of those "this game has been announced" news items like than we did reviews, which I'm sure, you know, that makes sense, of course. But you know, you'll Google for Lair of the Clockwork God or your search sites for Lair of the Clockwork God mentions, and they'll be interested enough or to just say, oh, it's Size 5 Games' next game. Look, they're making something new, but then for whatever reason, they don't have the time or resources or interest to review it, which is the important thing. So,
yeah, that's it. It's like I said, there's no answer to that question, is there? Really, it's just you kind of, as you were saying, there's so many different variables on. Well, one, what you can afford yourself, like say funding. There's loads of options to Kickstarter, but with Kickstarter, it almost seems like more work than.
Oh man, if I did a Kickstarter, I would do the most vanilla Kickstarter you've ever seen in your entire life. There is no way I am shipping out T-shirts and stickers to people.
I know,
like, and like what do they call stretch goals and all that sort of stuff. Like if you do a Kickstarter, it's like, I want to make this game and I need, you know, £100,000 to do it.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go, if we get £200,000, you get more levels. I do, if you get £200,000, I'll hire another artist so it gets done quicker. You know, like another programmer so that the code is slightly better. You know, to help out and make it happen. The Kickstarters look like more trouble than they're worth for a lot of people. You know, like, you know, if you make £200,000 to make a video game on Kickstarter, and then you find yourself just spending all day every day sending out boxes to people instead of making the video game, I think that's a problem. So if I did ever do a Kickstarter, it would be like old school vanilla Kickstarter.
Back it and I'll give you a copy. Yeah.
Yeah, you're backing this because you want to see the project succeed, not because you want a load of tchotchkes sent through the mail.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that Deanna also mentioned, and it also links into my last question for you about building the community, and she's asking about how you managed to do that. But I also wanted to talk about that in the sense of it seems very easy to connect and build with other indie developers, as there's the obvious hashtags that when you're developing the game, and lots of developers use those hashtags, indie game dev, hashtag game dev, all those ones. But how do you? It's the transition between targeting other developers, because they're probably not the people buying the game.
I disagree. I know indie development is all indie game developers buying each other's games. That's like 90% of where the income comes from.
But then obviously your market is that small group of people, isn't it? How do you start building the community and targeting just general gamers? Because you don't just want to target indie game fans as such, do you? Because
yeah, you do, because general gamers will latch onto something if it's extraordinarily popular. So if Fall Guys is already absolutely everywhere, they'll latch onto it. Until then, they won't give a shit about it. But people who like indie games, who specifically are fans of indie games, who are invested in games of that size and that caliber and that kind of thing, they're the people who I am interested in marketing to, if I do marketing. But like, they're the people I'm interested in talking to, because like you don't need to sell a colossal, like, okay, let's say each copy of Lair the Clockwork God brings me in 10 quid. I've only got to sell 20,000 copies and I've made more than enough money to make my next game. Like, Ben's wildly intelligent. He could probably tell you off the top of his head what £20,000 times 10 is. But
that's £2 million done.
£2 million. Don't even need to sell that many. No, but like 20,000 people. Are there 20,000 people in this world who are interested in indie games? Yes, probably. Those are the people. So you only need to appeal to those people. If you're appealing to people much wider than that, obviously your scope is much bigger, and those people are going to latch on when it's already massively popular. But from a starting point of view, you need to get in touch with the people who are I mean, listen to me talking like as if I know anything about anything. I don't. Demonstrably, like, Lair the Clockwork God has slightly underperformed. So I wouldn't take any of my advice. But in theory, I am aware that you target a subsection of a fan base, and there are more than enough people there that if they love it, you'll do all right financially. In practical terms, if you want to make £47 million, that's an entirely different conversation. That's something that you need to get in touch with, quote unquote, gamers, and have something like Fall Guys that sells to all of them. But like, if you want to just keep a company going and keep on making video games in your attic, like I do, the practicality is you don't necessarily need to sell an unfathomable number of copies, but you do need to, obviously need to sell like 10,000 copies at full price, which is obviously, you got to sell, or maybe you sell 50,000 copies at half the price. No one could do the maths on that, but if you sold 50,000 copies and you're only bringing in a fiver, what's that? That's 5 million. I don't think it's a guess. But anyway, yeah, it's I'd say that indie game fans are the main port of call for who you want to sell to.
There we go. Fantastic. Also, I've written here, beer waterfalls. Did you ever invent it?
No.
Is that the name of your next game?
No, but I have drunk so much beer and then gone for a wee that it's felt like I've invented a beer waterfall. Does that count?
Well, that'll do. It's an answer.
Good.
So you've just launched Clockwork God on consoles. That's just all happened now, isn't it? The last sort of week or two.
Yes.
It was already released on Windows, Mac, and Linux in February. Is it Linux? Is that how you say it?
Yeah,
Linux. Yes.
Is that how Dorset people say it?
We pronounce it Linux, but
Linux down in Dorset.
Yeah,
if you can get it through the copper wires. Anyway, yeah, so it was released on those in February, and as you say, it's just come out on Switch, Xbox One. When did that come out? September 4th?
Yes.
And hopefully PlayStation 4 will be following up soon, dependent on some red tape or technical issues or something that Dan doesn't understand, so there's no way that, because Dan is wildly intelligent and he doesn't understand it, so there's no way I'm gonna grok it.
Okay, awesome. And finally, your next game. So you said it's going to be 2 or 3 years, you reckon, for your next game. When are we going to start seeing snippets of what you're doing?
I put a couple of clips up on Twitter already. This was about 6 months ago when I obviously stopped working on it to focus on the console launches, but and then summer happened, so it's been a while since I've even touched the code. But I started putting together this thing where you play as a dinosaur and you can jump around the place and grab humans and fling them around. And I got a 5-year-old boy and he loves playing it so much that I now have to make that game because like I can't cancel that because he will be distraught. So I think one way or another is going to be that's going to happen. But Ben, Ben and I need to sit around and have a chat about it. Because the game itself is already fun and funny. But Ben and I think we need to go and once the tech is up and running, we need to go and have a little design meeting where we work out how we make it funny and engaging, and what the story and the plot and the setup and all that sort of stuff will be. That's to really make it stand out.
I think we need to. I think one big thing that I'm interested to find out is how much narrative is like the game is gonna. We're gonna discover how much narrative the game needs and can support. Is it a game that wants a lot of story? Is it going to be fun to put loads of not audio logs but text logs, or hey, maybe we could do a Kickstarter and get like voice acting for audio logs. That could be a stretch goal. But so I'll be interested to see whether it's, because Dan was saying, ideally it'll be more gifable. But does that mean that we can also put a load of story in there? And is it going to be? Is Dan going to need me, or is it going to be like Swindle or Private's kind of level of story where he can, he can handle that on his own? And
I think whatever happens, it's in our interest for you and me to meet and discuss this together, because it's always better having people to bounce ideas off and talk problems through with.
To me, just when you hear yourself say it out loud, even to someone, as you're explaining it, you're like, this is a stupid idea, isn't it? And then you see their face just nodding. Okay, good.
Like quite often what happens with me and Ben is that when we're designing puzzles for Clockwork God, for example, is you start saying something that's like, this is bad, but what if we did this? And then it's not, by getting your bad idea out, the other person thinks you're going to say something else, right? So quite often, like Ben would say, not this, but what about this? And I will think, oh, he's going to say that we should do this. And then he doesn't say that. And then I can go with, but what if we did this? And that's how quite a lot of our conversations work, is like just talking and talking and talking until ideas get refined and come out and inspiration hits.
Yeah, we have a code, like we will say not this, but at the start, like if we've got a general sense of, I want a clever puzzle where Dan is like Dan's gun ammo is suddenly going to come into play in this puzzle. So not this, but what if when he's firing his gun, the cartridges eject and hit Ben in the eye? Or so, like obviously dreadful idea, can't work, but I'm getting across the direction that I want to go in, and by saying not this, it kind of it allows us to
this
say
is my
stuff, to feel safe saying bad ideas.
A barrier, right? It's like a barrier that says, like, I'm aware this is shit.
Yeah.
But I need to say it to get it out of my brain, otherwise it's consuming my other ideas. Yeah. Wow, awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me. It's been amazing, and I actually can't wait to get back. I need to stop talking to you guys so I can carry on playing.
Good.
Are you stuck? Do you need a hint, or do you know what you're doing?
No. Well, funny enough, I put a tweet out the other day saying, "Have you ever been stuck on a game that you're embarrassed to ask questions about? Where you're thinking, I shouldn't be stuck here. What's happened?"
Ben did a very good spoiler-free walkthrough on this. It's on the Steam forums, isn't it, Ben? That
Yeah, I call it a hint through. Yeah,
hint through. So like, it doesn't tell you what the solution is, but it gives you like a little thing. That if you stuck, just look at everything, because Ben's in the game. Ben spells out what the puzzles are if you just use look at. People who struggle with the puzzles don't use look at. I've discovered.
Yeah, it's all right.
You can talk to Dan as well. He will occasionally give you a hint, like point you in the right direction. That one's less reliable than look at, though, to be honest.
Well, that's right. I'm not stuck. I'm just slowly taking it in.
Just taking your time. Good. I hope you enjoy the rest of it.
Thank you. And then I'll work my way back through the other catalogue that you have.
Excellent. That's what I'd like to hear. If you wanted to send me your money directly, that'd be ace. You can just set up a standing order from your bank account into mine.
Yeah, just for any future game, just auto pay.
Like a one-person subscription service.
Yes, exactly.
Cool. Well, again, like I said, thank you so much, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Same. Thank you very much.
Okay, there we go. So, a huge thank you to Dan and Ben. That was a fantastic chat. As always, you can find all the links to everything they've mentioned, all their social medias, and Tobey, the fabulous audio guy. All their links will be in the show notes for this, or in the YouTube comments if you're listening to this on YouTube. I'm sure you have already, but if you haven't picked up the game, I highly recommend that you do, because you will not be disappointed. So if you do, give us a shout. Let me know. You can find me on Twitter, as always, at Indiegameiacs. And if you are a developer and you would like to come on the podcast, then please just get in touch. Send me a DM on Twitter or Instagram or Indiegameiacs@gmail.com. Anywhere you like, you can find me. So the next episode will be ever so slightly different, because we're going to be talking to a streamer this time. I just thought it'd be cool to get a different perspective on the indie scene, maybe any tips for indie developers if they're looking to connect with streamers. So that will be next week, so keep an ear out for that. I won't tell you who it is yet, just, keep the suspense, but you'll enjoy it. As always, don't forget, if you haven't left a review for the podcast, I would hugely appreciate it if you did. That would be fantastic. This week's review comes from Will from the United States, and he says, "Great podcast for indies, soothing voice, great conversation, and a really nice guy. Great interviews and deep dives into the world of indie developers. What more do you want?" Well, Will, I don't know. What more do you want? You tell me. So if you have any suggestions for things you'd like me to cover on the podcast, please, as always, drop me a message, let me know. I've actually got lots more content coming, and that will be more based on YouTube. So if you are not following the YouTube account, you know how to use YouTube. Head over to YouTube, search Indiegameiacs, subscribe to the channel, and you're going to see more indie content on there. So there's lots more to come. Now I'm all set back up again. Now I can start creating new stuff for you all. So there you go. That is the waffle, as promised, at the end of the show. So let's not keep you any longer. So until next time, goodbye.